I was pretty excited to replay Devil May Cry 4 because it's a conflicting game. Devil May Cry 4 is a game often praised for its high skill ceiling gameplay that has kept people playing for hundreds of hours, but it's also critiqued for having a lackluster campaign with blatantly recycled content. Despite having put over 100 hours into DMC4 myself, I haven't started a fresh file on the game in over 6 years. So I thought it would be interesting to play DMC4 from the beginning with all my knowledge in the series. So let's get into it. Devil May Cry 4 takes place in the island of Fortuna, home of the Order of the Sword, a group that worships Sparta. You play as a scrappy young lad named Nero who lives in Fortuna's castle town, but isn't much of a believer. He's just a knight of the Order because that's what he's good at, having been trained by Credo, one of the Order's commanders, and he loves Credo's sister, Kyrie. But otherwise, Nero is a bit aimless, till Dante arrives to assassinate their holy leader, Sanctus, and you're then plunged into the game on your quest to capture this mysterious red-clad assailant. What any player of DMC3 would know is that Dante is a really complex playable character when he has access to all of his tools. Dante in DMC4 is far more complex than his DMC3 counterpart, so I think the introduction of Nero as a playable character works really well. DMC4 was the first game in the series released on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, so they were trying to reach an even bigger audience than ever before, since the first three were all PS2 exclusives. Nero is a great introduction to how Devil May Cry functions, as he only has one melee weapon, the sword, Red Queen, and one gun, a revolver called Blue Rose. This gives new players a character who is easier to get to grips with than Dante, who has all his different styles and weapons. Red Queen has a decent amount of combos at the start, and then when upgrading it, it's the only weapon you'll be able to focus on, giving that one weapon even more potential. The basic combos for Red Queen are all really ferocious as Nero wails on enemies, like the one where he just slams his sword to the demonic hordes like it's a baseball bat. His other combos having a wide spread to their attacks too, but still, it's easier to process as a new player. And then you can focus on learning the ropes on how to dodge enemies in Devil May Cry and how the style meter works and things like that. I just think Nero's simpler playstyle gives newcomers an easier intro to the series mechanics, and that goes for both DMC4 and DMC5. But that's not to say Nero isn't a high skill ceiling character, it's just not as high as Dante's. Nero is incredibly addicting to play as in his own right. Though, to get the most out of it, you'll need a couple things. For starters, Nero has Blue Rose mapped to the square button, which is how all firearms were in the first 3 games. However, the main mechanic of this gun is its charge shot. So I recommend remapping the shoot button to R2 so you can easily charge the gun while attacking with Red Queen. Besides that, you'll need to save up so you can afford some basic upgrades like Enemy Step, which allows you to jump cancel off of enemies, Air Hike, giving you the double jump, and the Sprint for faster movement. Not having access to some of that stuff was really weird to go back to when starting a fresh file in this game. As in, I forgot Blue Rose wasn't mapped to R2 by default because I haven't played without that for so long. And I also took Enemy Step for granted, since it's been so many years since I needed to unlock it. You don't even get Nero's snatch mechanic until a little bit into Mission 2, which definitely caught me by surprise. But anyway, it was funny. When I reviewed DMC4 the first time over 5 years ago, I didn't even know most of what Nero could do, which was evident since I said his playstyle gets old after a while. The comments in that episode were quick to inform me of my mistake. What I did know was that Nero was able to rev his sword up to 3 levels and that it would do more damage when maxed out. In that video, I said the challenge was revving up while avoiding damage, and this is absolutely not the case. The real highlight of playing as Nero is how if you hit the rev button during an attack with the right timing, it'll automatically rev up. Each attack has different timing to do this with, and it just takes practice to get right. But the dopamine hit when you get it right is never ending. Nero's combat loop is using Red Queen and trying to get the rev timing right for maximizing damage while doing all the DMC staples like jump canceling and the sort. Charging your gun and launching enemies away with it and then snatching them back with your Devil Bringer and using it to slam and toss enemies around and repeat. Nero has this seemingly unexplainable demonic arm, and with it he can grab enemies from great distances, and then with a press of the circle button you can pick them up and slam them around. When bosses are stunned, you can do this on them too, and it's super satisfying. The best parts of Nero's gameplay are when bosses fly towards you or send some projectiles at you, and proper timing will allow you to counter with the Devil Bringer. It's super fun and rewarding to play. Defensively, Nero has this dodge mechanic where if you dodge roll with just the right timing, you do this evasive dash maneuver which can be leveled up to give you extra dashes per each attack dodged. And then when closing the gap between Nero and the enemies, you can use the Devil Bringer to make enemies come to you, or you can get closer to them with the Streak, Nero's equivalent of Dante's Stinger, only with more spread to it. And you can even do this in mid-air, which is pretty badass. Nero is, as I said, a simpler playstyle than Dante by a considerable margin, but when you get into Nero's mechanics in depth, you find a character that's super cathartic to play as because of his frame-perfect dodge mechanics and his frame-perfect damage increase mechanics, and his other cool and flashy maneuvers that really get the job done. What complements the combat is the production value of DMC4. Nero's battle theme is also just the main theme of the game, Shall Never Surrender, and if we're just looking at all the pre-DMC5 battle themes, this one is probably my favorite. I just love how headbanging the first half is, before proceeding to the more romantic second half that plays in the credits. Both halves of the song are a great listen. The first half is such a catchy tune that you never get sick of while smacking demons around. But then, the game has gorgeous visuals and effects that make combat even more of a visual spectacle than the mechanics already did. I was playing the game on the 2015 Special Edition, which I can speak more on in depth later. But for right now, I just mean that I got to play it at 4K and 60 FPS on Steam, which makes it look like a pretty contemporary game because the lighting and areas look so good to this day. But then when sampling it on Xbox 360 for a bit, it still looks quite nice. The resolution is lower, but the frame rate is still solid, which is impressive with all these effects and models going by at this speed. The cutscenes were always beautiful to look at, though. DMC3 really upped the ante of video game motion capture, and DMC4 lives up to that legacy with frequent action cutscenes that are a joy to watch. The opening battle between Nero and Dante is everything you'd want to see in a next-gen Devil May Cry cutscene as they fly around the room doing cool stunts like them shooting at each other point blank and always dodging it somehow. It's a lot of fun to watch. In-game, the camera work is really stellar as well. DMC4 was one of the last action games to make great use of fixed camera angles, and while this can lead to some control issues I mentioned in my DMC1 video from a few months ago, you'll also get impressive shots that convey a lot of scale and scope almost effortlessly. So the game is great to look at and listen to, and is great to play as well. What more could a person want? Well, that's where the issues start to come in. When I replay DMC3, I'm fine just playing through the whole campaign with everything unlocked and having fun with that. Starting a fresh file is also enjoyable. And it's the only way you can replay Devil May Cry 1, and it's a blast. DMC4 is a game I've played for maybe 250 hours of my life, but I've only played through the campaign 3 times now. The reason is because this game plays like a dream, and I could load up Bloody Palace as Nero, Dante, or Virgil any day of the week, but the campaign in this game is kinda weak. In the Nero portion of the game, it's just filled with gimmicks I don't care for. Using the Devil Bringer, Nero can launch from point to point, but as always, the platforming control in Devil May Cry is awful. One of the early missions sees Nero needing to swing through this room. The low ceiling is covered in spikes, which sends you back to the ground on contact where enemies are waiting for you. In theory, this is a simple section. You just get from point to point, but Nero jumps up a bit with each point, and at the last swing, I just kept getting damaged by that, and it turns out you just need to press the button as lightning fast as you can and you'll be fine. But I thought I was pressing it at a perfectly fine pace because it worked in all the other ones, but evidently not. What an idiot I was for my inability to intuit that. Nero also has to contend with this dice roll game. Depending on what color you land on, you get different effects. One of them showering you in red orbs, and another one of them dropping enemies in, for example. If you hit the die, whatever number was on top is how many spaces you'll move. So if you just count up how many spaces you need to move and count how many you can safely move without landing on a punishing space, you'll do just fine. And it's also only one room, but I don't like doing it because it's fucking boring. Nero also needs to power up these gyro things and hit them so they can be moved into the correct spaces. That's also a bit of a snooze fest because it's the kind of puzzle where you figured it out long before it's considered solved. It's not bad or frustrating, I just don't care to play that mission. And that's how I feel about many Nero missions. I don't really want to play them that much because the Devil Bringer gimmicks just slow the pace down. Some level gimmicks are okay, like in the forest where you need to identify what the correct path is or you'll be stuck like the Lost Woods in The Legend of Zelda. That works just fine. And then the slow down time gimmicks from the fortress are also not too disruptive to the pace of the game. But overall, I'm not hungering to revisit DMC4's campaign because it's not that fun to play through. But that's just Nero. It only gets worse from there. But before I even think about it, the intrigue in the story carries the first half of the game through the lesser moments. 5 years ago, I said the story wasn't that interesting in this game, but I definitely don't agree with that anymore. I think it was a great choice to have Nero be the POV character here. One, because I've always liked Nero. I thought he had entertaining banter with the demons he encountered. Like how he just walks past Burial like he's not a giant fire centaur right before riffing with him. But then his role in the world adds a lot to the story too. Even though he's clearly on the outs with the religious community he finds himself in, when starting the game you just kind of assume these people are on the level because this is where the main character lives, until Dante is the one to kill his holiness. Dante in this scene is presented like a terrifying monster, and from the perspective of Nero and Kyrie, he is. For newcomers to Devil May Cry, it's pretty clear by the end of Mission 1 that Dante might not be some villain, but he's very mysterious. But then for the longtime fans, clearly Dante has to be the good guy. We're just seeing this adventure from someone else's eyes. So you play through the early missions where Nero is tasked to capture Dante. He and the audience then start to learn more about the Order of the Sword and what they're actually up to. Agnes, the researcher, is creating angelic creatures to battle demons that have been released into the world by the Hellgates he created. Agnes even recovered Yamato, Virgil's sword, albeit in a broken state. But the twist is that Nero is able to restore it and fuses it with the Devilbringer. In gameplay, this gives Nero a sort of devil trigger. It's not a full-on devil form like Dante or Virgil could tap into. This is just some demonic power you can use to temporarily be more powerful. In gameplay, it functions no different than a devil trigger. I'm just clarifying that in the lore, Nero doesn't activate his own devil powers until DMC 5. This is just a fraction of that. Though something I thought was funny about replaying this game was how, for some reason, I had remembered it being a theory that Nero was Virgil's son in DMC 4 that got confirmed in the DMC 3142 art book between games, and then it was solidified when it got brought up in DMC 5. However, when replaying DMC 4 and paying attention to the cutscenes, it's pretty damn obvious. Nero restores Yamato, which Agnes said he couldn't, no matter how hard he tried, and then Nero has this blue ghostly demon above him when he activates his devil powers and claims that there was always a voice in his head clamoring for more power. If that wasn't obvious enough, Sanctus needs the blood of Sparta to activate his savior statue and use it to rid the world of demons. The plan was to capture Dante and use him, but he decides to settle for Nero. So the game just says Nero is a descendant of Sparta, and we all know Dante doesn't have any kids. So while DMC 4 never says Nero is Virgil's son, it basically did. But yeah, once Nero is almost killed by Agnes and given his second wind from Yamato, his quest then changes from capturing Dante for the Order and becomes finding out what's really going on here. That leads to Nero's battle with Credo, which is absolutely one of the best fights in the game. As I was saying earlier, Nero bosses are so much fun because of how satisfying it is to play as Nero, but also because they give you plenty of chances to use your dodge and Devilbringer abilities, and that shit never gets old. But then Agnes captures Kyrie and uses her as bait to capture Nero. This outrages Credo, but Sanctus kills him and captures both Nero and Kyrie to use them to power the Savior, leaving it to the son of Sparta to save the day. I think this is my favorite incarnation of Dante from a writing standpoint because he's just having the time of his life on this mission. Another reason why I think it was really smart to make Nero the main character of DMC 4 is that Dante doesn't have an arc in this game, like, at all, and that's a good thing in this case. To explain why, I'll backtrack a bit. DMC 1 established that Dante's goal was to kill Mundus, the demon that caused the death of his mother. During that game, Dante also sees Virgil as a slave of Mundus, and in his battle with the king of the underworld, Dante summons the full strength of his father in the final battle. So, Dante's goal as a character was already accomplished in the first game. He basically was an all-powerful badass at that point. DMC 3 was able to add on to the character by taking place before DMC 1, showing how Dante went from an aimless goof to accepting his human and demonic heritage and choosing to battle to protect the human world from the demonic hordes. In DMC 2, Dante was just an all-powerful badass, but he was still the main character of the game with no arc or growth in sight. Of course, that's just one of the many issues with the story in that game, as Lucia did have an arc, just not a particularly compelling one, and then Dante's story was genuinely nothing. DMC 4 is self-aware of the fact that Dante is as powerful as he is, and the game plays into it. It's funny that the Order's plan was to capture Dante because that was never gonna happen. This dude is just running circles around them and enjoying every minute of it. In the Nero portion, he shows up whenever he feels like and then disappears, totally in control at all times.
Though I suspect you carry something different from the others.
What are you talking about?
You will come to learn the meaning soon enough. But business beckons.
Hey!
Adios, kid.
When he does want to move the plot along, he can't be stopped.
What are you doing here? Forget it. I don't have time for this.
And neither do I. So I'll cut to the chase. I'm here for the sword.
Even when Nero tries to fight Dante in Mission 10, Dante just goes along with it just to humor him.
You look as if you've just been playing me from the beginning.
You don't play as Dante for super long in DMC 4, but when you do, it's super fun to be an OP character who knows how OP they are and doesn't take a single one of his foes seriously.
You can stay and die, or you can walk your ugly ass back through that gate. It's your call, pal.
It's very entertaining.
No! 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 Oh, no! 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 No!
If you're gonna continue your research in the next world,
No! No! No!
do your homework first.
It works because Nero is the main character with the arc in this game. DMC4 is about Nero finding himself and his place in the world and accepting his powers. Dante is just a side character you can enjoy the antics of, which is great for the longtime fans. A flashback reveals that Lady hired Dante and Trish to investigate the Order and find out if they were up to anything. Trish infiltrated the Order as Gloria, giving them the Devil's Sword Sparta as a way to gain their trust. Once she found out what they were up to, that's when Dante killed Sanctus. Now, Dante has to stop the Savior and destroy the Hellgates. Gameplay-wise, Dante is arguably at his most complex in DMC4. Not in terms of the number of weapons, but definitely has the highest skill ceiling of any character in any of these games. The playstyle has simultaneously been simplified from DMC3 while also being made more complex in other ways. For one, the designers removed the Quicksilver and Doppelganger styles from DMC3. In 4, you have the 4 basic styles from 3, Trickster, Swordmaster, Gunslinger, and Royal Guard. Only now, these 4 styles can be switched with the press of the D-pad. Modders have worked this into DMC3 on PC, and Capcom did it officially for DMC3's Switch port, but DMC4 is where style switching made its debut. The fusion of these styles creates more depth than DMC3 had in the moment-to-moment gameplay, like launching an enemy and using an air combo on them with Swordmaster, but then air dashing over them with Trickster, and then using Rainstorm on them with Gunslinger. Rainstorm is supposed to be a stationary maneuver, but using Trickster's air dash before it allows you to fly forward while doing it. Style moves that were really situational, like running up walls with Trickster and extra gun attacks at close range, have been cut. But what is here are the essentials, and they work like a dream. Dante's high skill ceiling comes from the things I can barely even comprehend. Royal Guard is really tough in DMC4. The timing on it is the strictest in the series, and there is a secret mission in this game that absolutely tortures you with that fact. But then DMC4 and only 4 has this thing called guard flying, where somehow Dante can fly around the arena with Royal Guard. I've only tried it a couple times and I seem to not have the ability to do it. But it is a thing that top DMC4 players can do, and many in that camp were upset that it wasn't in DMC5. But I can say this. The strict guard timing in DMC4 does make it really satisfying to get it right. The sound design just sells how badass you are for doing it right, and the Royal Release attack gets me instantly hyped up every time. One of my favorite improvements between DMC3 and 4 is the upgrade system. 4 still has red orbs you use to buy items, but it introduces something new called Proud Souls. These are rewarded to you after completing a mission, and you get more of them if you finish the mission with a high ranking. I first thought having 2 currencies was a bit needless, but I think it worked out just fine. You use red orbs, which function the same as always, to buy healing items, and blue orbs to increase your maximum health, and purple orbs to increase your max devil trigger. Then the Proud Souls let you unlock more combos and abilities for your various weapons and get upgrades to your character's core abilities. I complained that DMC1 made Air Hike, the double jump, only available for Alistair and not Ifrit, and then DMC3 only gave you Air Hike for 3 of the weapons and not the other 2. I thought it was pointless to make you buy the double jump 3 times and lock 2 of the weapons out of it. In DMC4, you buy Air Hike once and you can use it with any weapon, which is a great improvement. I waited until talking about Dante to bring this up because the new upgrade system has the biggest impact on him, if you ask me. I almost had a fully maxed out Dante from the beginning. As Nero, I always felt like I didn't have a lot of Proud Souls, so I solved that problem by grinding Mission 2 on Legendary Dark Knight difficulty. There are so many enemies in this mode that getting an S is pretty easy. And then when I started playing as Dante, I had like 60k Proud Souls, so I just fully maxed out all 4 of Dante's styles before I even started his first mission. In DMC3, I thought the styles leveling up through experience points was a real drag on the game, as it took forever to get a style to level 3. You could say that encourages replaying the game, but I felt like it just turned into a grindfest when I replayed the game on the Switch. Someone in the comments of that video said they felt like buying style upgrades and getting them through EXP was basically the same thing. You had to play well and grind to either get the experience or the souls/orbs to do it, right? But I think the key difference is that experience grinding just takes forever and you need to do it for every style. If you play well and have the required currency, you could be like me in this run and have the full powers of the styles pretty quickly and then put them to good use by playing the game at the highest level I can. I just find this system of upgrades to be more accessible than DMC3's. So yeah, Dante's a super cool badass and is really fun to play as. What could possibly go wrong? Well, like Nero, there is a but at the end of that sentence. Dante's portion of the game reveals some major cracks in the armor. DMC4 certainly never reaches the unfinished lows of DMC2 or anything, but the campaign really starts chugging along here. To get to the Savior, Nero needed to progress from Fortuna's castle town to Fortuna Castle through the woods and then the HQ of the Order. The Savior takes off and flies to the castle town, so Dante needs to run from the HQ, through the woods, through the Fortuna Castle, and then through the castle town on foot. You have to essentially play a truncated version of the game you just played, but backward. When you hear a game get called unfinished these days, it's often because of some major deficiencies that make the game not up to what many consider sellable standards. Devil May Cry 4 is verifiably unfinished, it's just not unpolished. As I have been saying, DMC4 is mechanically fantastic, but Dante doesn't get original content. It's the same stuff with some of the dumb gimmicks removed. Dante just flips the bird to the dice game, for example. But then he also gets other lame level ideas, like an entire stage in the woods where you need to trial and error your way through these portals to find the right one, and also have these enemies pop up from the ground that try and catch you. Worst of all, Dante doesn't get original boss fights to capitalize on his moveset. You just refight the same bosses from Nero's section, just as Dante. It worked out well enough to where the bosses function fine as either character, it's just very repetitious, and the game is pretty shameless about it. But why did this happen? Well, it doesn't seem like there was a huge saga behind it. A panel with Ruben Langdon, the voice of Dante and director of the motion capture scenes, summed it up pretty well.
It was called running out of ideas and running out of time.
Ideas and time.
I didn't produce the game side, I only produced the cinematics. So the actual in-game stuff was a whole different team.
So you don't exactly know what the...
But what I can say, what I know from having the communications with those guys, was that to appease the Dante fans, they wanted to squeeze Dante in there somewhere and give them playability as Dante. So they sort of, what do you call it? Forced, even though with gameplay and story, when you force something, it's like why it doesn't. At the end of the day, it doesn't really work. But they kind of, in their minds, they had to do it to appease the fans. So they forced Dante into the game. It really was a Nero game.
Perhaps they were trying to avoid a Metal Gear Solid 2 situation where fan freaks lose their little baby minds over having a different protagonist, or just wanted to throw the Dante fans a bone. Either way, they didn't have the dev time to give Dante fully original content, so you just get a few missions playing the game in reverse. It's not awful. Dante's gameplay is way too good for me to say this section's a piece of shit or something. I just don't think it's that fun to play because Dante's levels are obviously recycled content with some lame gimmicks to not make it feel like eating the table scraps. But it just reinforces my main thing against DMC4. I think this game is top-notch mechanically, but the campaign can get kind of draining to play. Unlike Nero, Dante does unlock new weapons, and since you only have him for a few missions, you unlock new stuff at a pretty rapid pace. Dante starts with Rebellion, Ebony and Ivory, and the shotgun, but the forest boss grants Dante Gilgamesh, the hand-to-hand option for this game. This is super fun to use because the combos are fast and fierce, and there's great techniques to do with it. Like this charged uppercut. If you activate DT on the moment of contact, you do a wicked amount of damage. It's the best bare hand option in the series yet, if you ask me. It has many combos that Beowulf had in DMC3, but also cool attacks like Kick 13 that Ifrit had in DMC1. From the toad-looking demon, Dante gets Pandora's Box, which can be thrown like a boomerang, shoot rockets, shoots lasers, and can be turned into a battle station that can fly, or just release blinding light onto demons. All that's pretty cool. In fact, Pandora's Box was the only thing that allowed me to beat the secret mission where Dante has to kill 2 waves of enemies without taking a hit. But I don't feel like it's easy to work this weapon into combat that much. Its attacks are too slow for me to want to bother with a lot of the time. And lastly, you unlock Lucifer, which Dante uses to stab his enemies. A toss of a rose causes all the little knives to explode. I certainly think this is a useful weapon, and it's fast and comes with neat combos. However, you only get to use it in the last 2 Dante missions, one of which is a boss fight only. So I got most of my usage with Lucifer and Bloody Palace, not the campaign. You unlock it so late it doesn't even have that many upgrades. DMC4 thankfully removed the system from 3 where you had to pick only 2 weapons and 2 guns at a time, but then the game only has 3 weapons and 3 guns anyway. I doubt it would have made that much of a difference, to be honest. Which sums up my thoughts on the Dante stuff pretty well. Most of it works very well, it just doesn't come together cohesively. DMC4 got remastered as DMC4 Special Edition in 2015, and I'm sure some fans hoped this would be able to redeem DMC4 somewhat. While this is the best version of the game by far and the only one you should play, I think it kind of doubles down on the DMC4 issue. Special Edition adds some great stuff. For example, Turbo Mode, the game running at 120% speed. For an action-oriented game, this makes the combat even better. The resolution's been upped, the frame rate's more solid, all that good stuff. But the major draw is that it added 2 campaigns. One starring the other son of Sparta, Virgil, and the second new campaign stars Lady and Trish. This is where the remaster just doubled down on the same problem. Virgil is an absolute beast in DMC4 SE. I thought his playstyle was not that fun in 3 Special Edition because all his attacks were just boss animations repurposed to make a playable character, and I thought that paled in comparison to DMC3's Dante. In 4, they used Virgil's playstyle in 3 as a base for a much more fun character. When fully maxed out, Virgil can just use Yamato to just fly around the room and decimate demons like it's nothing. And then you can use Force Edge and Beowulf for the same purpose. Virgil's attacks, whether slow or fast, have such weight to them, you feel like nothing stands a chance against you, which is perfect for Virgil. Trish also has some cool moves. They kinda used her DMC2 gameplay as an inspiration since she switches from using Sparta's sword to bashing demons with her bare hands. There are some cool effects and attacks you can do with it, though she's similar enough to Dante that I'd rather just play as him, to be honest. And then Lady uses her firearms and has no demonic powers. What melee attacks she has feel pretty slow. I'll be real, I never play as her much, just never got into it like the others. But anyway, like Virgil in DMC3 SE, the 2 new campaigns added for these characters is just the DMC4 campaign again. For Virgil, you'll play all 20 missions as him, including Dante's backwards missions, where you fight the same bosses again, only as the same character you were before. And in the last one, you play as Lady in the Nero missions and Trish in the Dante missions. So they crafted 3 characters with complex movesets rivaling the main duo, and all you can use it on is the same hit-or-miss campaign rife with boring gimmicks, repeated content, and recycled bosses. It's DMC4, so the combat is fun to play, but the levels surrounding it aren't that great. And the endgame doesn't do it for me either. After Dante defeats Agnes and reclaims Yamato, he gets access to the Dark Slayer style. You use it by pressing whichever style button is currently active, so if you're on Trickster and want to use Dark Slayer, you press up on the D-pad. Using this sword, Dante is not nearly as powerful with it as Virgil, but you can use the sword and get some great jump cancel attacks out of it. The only mission you'll be using it on is the infamous Mission 18, where Dante battles the Savior. It's a pretty commonly disliked boss fight, however I don't hate it or anything. I think it's a cool set piece to jump around this massive statue attacking, but there's not much room to do stylish attacks, so you just jump from point to point trying to hit the weak spots. It's a pretty one-note boss fight and lasts a long time, which is why the Savior is probably the most hated non-DMC2 boss in the series. But there's only so much Dante can do because Sanctus is operating from the inside of the statue, so Dante gets Yamato inside the statue to power up Nero for the final levels. Unfortunately, Mission 19 is perhaps one of the worst. You get one of my least favorite tropes in all of gaming, a boss rush. But before that, you gotta solve the dice game again. But yeah, boss rush. Even though you battled these 4 bosses as both Nero and Dante, you have to battle them as Nero again. It's pretty easy to make short work of them because of how many more upgrades you have compared to the first round, but still, the blatantly recycled content is hard to ignore because the game already pulled this stunt. At least in DMC3, I liked how the boss rush had a puzzle-solving element to it that I went into in the previous video, but this doesn't work for me. The final boss with Sanctus, at least on normal mode, will not be nearly as tough as Virgil was in DMC3. If you made it this far and know how to time the Devil Bringer, you'll definitely beat this boss without too much trouble emerging from it. But in the end, Nero kills Sanctus for good this time, rescues Kyrie, destroys the Savior, and returns the Sparta sword to Dante, and the day is saved. I've always liked the ending here, especially with the hindsight from DMC5 where Dante says he knew Nero was Virgil's son from the beginning, so I just think it's wholesome to see Dante put the jokes aside for a bit and have a nice moment with his nephew, letting him keep his father's sword.
Wait. You forgot this.
Keep it.
What? I thought this meant a lot to you. That's the only kind of gift worth giving. I want to entrust it to you, so I am. What you do from here is your call.
Hey, Dante. Will we meet again?
But at the end of the day, when replaying DMC4 from scratch, did I enjoy it? Well, the video has mentioned this a few times, but yeah, I really did. DMC4 is a conflicting game for me because everything negative that I've said about it in the last few minutes is true. I don't think the campaign in this game is the most fun thing to replay. As stated, DMC1 and 3 are games where I wouldn't mind going back to them and doing all the missions. Whenever I replay DMC4, I usually never play one of the actual missions, and definitely not all of them. DMC4 feels really undercooked by the end with repetitive content and lame gimmicks, but DMC4 is also one of the most fun and satisfying games I've ever played. Nero is a blast to play as, Dante is fantastic in DMC4, and so is Virgil. These are combat mechanics so deep that you could spend hours on it, and I have, perhaps too many. When you beat the campaign, you unlock Bloody Palace mode, and this is where a majority of my DMC4 playtime has come from, 101 floors of non-stop action. Even though I think DMC4's enemy variety is also a little lacking, I don't think there are as many enemies in this game that are as unfun as some of the DMC3 enemies. So BP is always enjoyable to play, even if I've never actually beaten it without super characters. But no matter how far I end up getting per round, it's always great to come back to because I think DMC4 is one of the best action games of all time when just looking at the combat. In the present, I think DMC4 is easy to sleep on. Before there was Devil May Cry 5, you could look at DMC4 and be sad that it didn't get to be the fully fleshed out game it wanted to be. You'd see the combat and dream of what if, but now that we have DMC5, and that's how a lot of people first got into the series, I think DMC4 is now slept on. While I think DMC5 is one of the greatest games ever made, I think DMC4 deserves a better rep than being the unfinished blueprint for DMC5. Because this isn't some disgrace of gaming, it's an awesome game that's well worth playing. The flaws just don't counteract how enjoyable this game is for me. It's much, much greater than the sum of its parts. If you haven't played this game, I recommend it. At the very least, if you play it before DMC5, you can appreciate just how great that game is. But that's just about all the time we have for today. I've talked a lot about DMC5 today, but next up is not that game, it's the bizarre course correction Capcom took for the next installment. DMC Devil May Cry, the attempted reboot. The most hated DMC game besides 2. So hope everyone looks forward to that. In the meantime, I'll close by saying what I always do. If you made it this far into the video, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Oh, and before I go, I really like how in the ending, the game continues the gag from the animated series where Lady always cheaps out on paying Dante.
If it was a lifesaver gig, then don't you think we deserve a little more? You call this sincerity?
More? Was it not your fault that things escalated to the level that they did? Bringing Sparta into the spotlight?
Unlike the show, Dante at this point is so used to it that he doesn't even get angry at it, he just rolls with the punches.
Hey, I was just getting to the good part.
This is your case too, Dante.
Yeah, well, we take what we can get, right?
And then he still hangs out with her because he just likes having friends that much. It's a fun dynamic with these three.
Can I come along?
Do what you want. But don't expect to get paid.
There's something so exciting about all this. You think so, right?
I won't lie.
Okay. Are you ready? Come on, babes. Let's rock!